Hey, what's going on, guys? How is everybody doing? So over the past weekend, we finally got the 1.4 patch announcement stream, and we caught wind of who the next banners were going to be, those being Venti and Child. The question that I think a lot of you may be asking, and I know you're asking because you've been asking in the live streams, was who you should save your primos for. And no, I don't actually mean Child, because if it's between those two, let's face it, Venti wins hands down. No, it's between Venti and the inevitable Zhongli rerun that is bound to happen eventually. So the question is, do you go for Venti now? He's coming within the next couple weeks, or do you save for the eventual rerun that we know is eventually going to happen? We just don't know exactly when. Because Zhongli, at least in my eyes, and I think in a lot of people's eyes as well, now that he's got his new buffs, do fight Venti and probably Bennett for top spot of like the best hero in Genshin Impact. So these are the two heroes that I feel like a lot of people have been asking me who they should save for. So before we even ask this question, we have to ask ourselves, can we actually save up enough primo gems in order to guarantee ourselves a Zhongli if we went and got a Venti now and brought our primo gems to exactly 0? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. If you are a dedicated free-to-play player, meaning you put no money into this game whatsoever, you're only going to be able to acquire roughly 45 wishes per character cycle. And if we take a look at their past banners to see roughly how long we could expect to see a Zhongli banner, Venti was first released on the 28th of September, Zhongli on the 2nd of December, meaning you would have 2 months to save up primos, and at 45 wishes per month, you could guarantee yourself a pity, but that doesn't exactly guarantee you a Zhongli, especially if you got Venti on the first time, you're looking at a 50-50 the second time. So then that brings us to this ultimate question is, do you go for the Venti now, guaranteed to get it, or do you wait and go for Zhongli? Well, we're going to answer that, but first, let's quickly go over those kits, a quick little breakdown on each of them. If you want to skip this section, timestamps will, of course, be down in the description below, so you can go towards the more analytical side as opposed to just looking at their kits. So the easiest way to think about Venti is that he sucks. Not like in terms of being bad or anything, he's like a vacuum. Venti is a crowd control hero. He thrives on being able to control the enemy movements. His skill does animo damage in an area of effect and launches smaller enemies off the ground. Venti doesn't exactly body shame, but this won't do the same to larger enemies. His burst creates a vortex that draws all enemies into it, but again, no big boys here. This attack does a ton of AoE damage and makes it easy for your teammates to hit a bunch of enemies all at the same time. He also acts as an insane energy recharge battery on elemental teams, utilizing his 4th Ascension talent to provide 15 energy to any hero of the same element that his burst swirled with. Once you start farming for artifacts at AR 45, you can also start acquiring Viridescent Veneer pieces to further support your other hero's damage, reducing the resistance to whatever element he swirls with by 40%. Zhongli can be either a supporting hero or your main DPS. As a main DPS, he'll focus on flashy polearm attacks and doing the majority of your damage. But as a support, he'll focus on protecting your team from incoming damage by creating a shield, but you know what they say, the best defense is a good offense. Or something like that. And his shield does that too, providing a 20% physical and elemental resistance debuff to enemies close to your active hero. This is really important because it's a universal debuff that will work with any hero, whereas a lot of debuffs only apply to one specific type of damage. He can also create pillars with his skill to do damage over time in a small area of effect and create energy, though he's far worse in this aspect than Venti. And of course, my favorite aspect of him, he can drop a giant rock from the sky, dealing a ton of AoE damage and freezing enemies in their place through petrification. So now that we understand a little bit more about how these characters actually work, let's go over some of the pros and cons and why you would choose one hero over the other. Venti is far better in the early to mid game, whereas Zhongli will unleash his true potential the later you get into the game. A lot of the late game currently in Genshin is dominated by defeating bosses for Ascension materials or fighting the weekly world bosses to acquire talent level up materials. Even the current floor 12 of Abyss is dominated by larger enemies, those that Venti won't be able to control with his burst. It's in these exact situations that Zhongli is a far better hero because these enemies do far more damage than smaller mobs like Hilichurls. So having a shield to protect yourself will be super important so that you don't get combo killed by a couple of Geovicips in a small window of time or get stomped on by a Rune Grader. Venti is much better in fights with a lot of smaller mobs, and this most happens through the early stages of the game. Now, don't get me wrong, these fights happen in the late game as well. Floor 11, Chamber 2 of the Abyss is currently the hardest level, even being harder than anything on Floor 12, and Venti is almost a necessity to be able to clear it. The content that he does excel at, he makes laughably easy. You can clear out a room room in an instant, but he's quite complicated to build for optimal damage. The Venti main's Discord server has a complete Excel sheet that goes over his best weapons and artifact main stats at every level from 60 and up, and it changes all over the place. It's not really consistent at all. If you don't care about that though, Zhongli almost exclusively scales off of HP, at least as a supporting build, meaning that if you want a big shield and more damage, you'll have to spend some time leveling up quite a bit, whereas Venti can succeed and do exactly what he needs to at the recommended minimum level of 60 out of 70 for a support hero. A big, and I mean big, downside to Venti though is the fact that when he uses his burst, he lifts enemies off the ground, and there are a lot of heroes who can't actually auto attack and hit enemies in the vortex, which is the entire point of bringing them together. You do have heroes in the game though, like Ganyu for example, who can take prime advantage of this since she's a ranged hero and does hit enemies in an area of effect, but for a hero like the newly released Hu Tao, she's kind of out of luck and simply has to stand back and wait for the enemies to fall back to the ground. So, in my opinion, who do I think that you should save your Primo Gems for? I think there are two categories that most players are going to fall in, and I think that you first have to ask yourself, which category do you belong to? The first category being those players who are in the early to mid game, you know, somewhere around AR 20 to 30, 35. You're a light spender, maybe even not a spender at all, and you haven't really touched any of the end game content like going through your weekly bosses or touching the Abyss. The flip side of that is a player who's doing just that. Probably around the AR 40 to 45 area, starting to farm artifacts, doing the weekly bosses. That way you can level up your talents past level 6, getting through the Abyss all the way through to floor 12. These are the things that kind of signify that you've reached that end game stage. If you are in the former of these two categories, I would suggest going for Venti. Overall, in the short term, he's going to make things a lot easier and faster to clear for you. However, if you are in the latter category, I would suggest holding out for Zhongli. Overall, that shield is just really impressive. He does a lot of damage with his burst, and the damage resistance shred is not something to overlook. It's actually really good. And as we get farther and farther into the game and more content gets released, it's likely that a lot more content is going to be boss based, where Zhongli will be much better than Venti. At the end of the day though, it really does come down to personal preference. So if you do prefer one of these characters over the other, by all means go for them, because at the end of the day, this is a video game. The goal is to have fun. So if you have a character that you prefer, even if you don't necessarily fit into one of the categories, by all means go ahead and wish for that character just to have as much fun as you can. However, this is of course just my opinion, and this is what I would suggest to players looking to figure out how to proceed. Hopefully though, you guys did find some use in this video and it did help you decide which hero to go ahead and wish for or hold out for in Zhongli's case. If you guys are looking for more content from me though, you can head over my Twitch page, twitch.tv/xjazze, or you can support me right here on YouTube by clicking that red subscribe button. I do stream here 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and as well as put 3 videos out a week. Like the video if you liked it and click that notification bell. That way you never miss a video. If you want to join our community, please do. Down in the description below, there's a link to join us. We have a lot of fun over there, a lot of cool people over there to chat with. So if you're looking for a new community to join, highly recommend the Discord. But guys, that's all I got for today. Hopefully you did enjoy. I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.